Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist, the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Doing well. First things first, we love it when we get listener comments and feedback.
Always.
This past week, we got a comment/question from one of our dear friends, Antonio Lopez, and he asked a question about one of our statements, one of our sort of blanket statements about Thor: The Dark World. We sort of dismissed the movie as a whole.
Yes, we said the movie was meaningless and had little purpose in the bigger,
outside of revealing the Infinity Stone.
Although, as we got into the conversation, we did give value to some characters, in particular Loki and Thor.
He specifically asks if this movie is a bigger piece of the entire universe simply because at the end of it all, in the Loki show, the events of Thor: The Dark World did not happen to him. Yet when he's shown the events of Thor: The Dark World, he is visibly shaken, disturbed, and appalled that he is partly responsible for the death of his mother, Frigga. Could this revelation then change this variant Loki into the anti-hero he becomes? Does Thor: The Dark World then make a huge impact for Loki and what could possibly come? 100%. 100%. I mean, we saw that he saw a few things in the future. That thing definitely turned this particular Loki. I think you and I were saying basically when you just take this movie for when it was made and laying out the groundwork for Infinity War and Endgame, ultimately the thing that they are establishing is the Infinity Stone, which Thanos needs to get for the gauntlet. But post Infinity War and Endgame, 100%, this changes everything, or at least this one little moment changes everything for this particular character. Now, could we say that changes everything for the entire MCU? Technically, because the Loki TV series does. It splits off the timelines. It opens the door to all these additional sprouting timelines. Then, quite possibly Thor: The Dark World might have the greatest impact on the MCU than any other movie, maybe. Although that being said, it's almost like Loki himself is kind of irrelevant in Loki because his becoming the anti-hero did not prevent...
Sort of like the Indiana Jones theory.
Yeah, the theory on Raiders. It didn't prevent Sylvie from killing the one he who remains. Therefore, Loki is kind of irrelevant in the context of that series. Now we'll see what happens to that Loki.
Right. Loki didn't actually cause the multiple universes to
his
emerge.
Being an anti-hero didn't cause that.
Nor did he prevent that from happening.
Correct.
So I see what you're saying. Of course I'm going to argue that what the benefits are actually within the character himself. I know he's not real,
right?
But
no, yeah, 100%. But if you're just talking about the character, that's one thing. If you're talking about the MCU as a greater whole, here's
what I'll say, because I'm glad Antonio asked us this question.
Because it gives you a chance to
I can talk about
pine
Loki.
over Loki a little more.
So here's how I look at this. Yes, of course you need those moments in Thor: The Dark World to appear in Loki the series for Loki to observe what could have been, like where your life goes if you do not take pause and take inventory of your relationships and your mannerisms and your behaviors and your impulsivity. Like that was your future, and you're harmful and you're terrorizing and people die. You know, there's a lot of loss. I think that connection leads him to a huge transformation, and it's probably necessary in the Loki series. But I am going to say this, which isn't really even, I guess I'd say this really isn't, this kind of leads to more, I don't know, meaninglessness, which is that both, if we look at those two trajectories, both Lokis kind of end up in the same place psychologically. And that for me really evidences equifinality, which in psychology is this concept how all these divergent experiences still can lead to the same outcome. So for instance, like whether a person has childhood abuse or parental divorce or loses somebody close to them, they will always end up being a depressed person. It's one particular theory that helps us explain why so many different variant experiences can actually lead to the same disorder. So pulling from that theory, whether it's from the Loki series or from the cinematic universe, you know, the film series, Loki will always end up at a place of redemption, at a place of reflecting on what is my life and how am I going to do better, and still in that process do harm, experience loss, and cause difficulties. The main difference, of course, is in the films he's killed by Thanos.
Yeah. The interesting thing, as you're talking about it, what interests me is that Loki Prime takes a significantly longer amount of time to get to this point, to get to the true anti-hero point. I mean, he helps Thor in Thor: The Dark World as a result of his grieving his mother, which he directly had an impact on. But he's still backstabby. He's still looking out for himself. He's still trying to become the king of Asgard. He's still over the course of the next several movies.
Oh yeah, even up till Ragnarok, which we're not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, we're not talking about any of this. But he still hasn't gotten there. This Loki in the series sees one moment which he didn't have a direct involvement in, and that instantly changes him. I mean, it's almost like the idea of it is unthinkable. The idea of having had a hand in Frigga's death is enough to then make him do better.
Well, and that's why equifinality doesn't just refer to disorders. This concept that no matter what you do, events will eventually cause you to struggle. It also refers to recovery. And you're absolutely right. In the Loki series, he manages to recover much more quickly and in a much more pro-social way. In the films, it does take him longer to redeem himself and to find meaning and value in himself and his relationships. And it's incredibly tragic that way. So I want to apply that theory to getting better, and to recovery too. It means that even if you have all these divergent experiences, you can still get better.
Yeah. It's almost like the difference is learning for yourself versus being told this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen if you touch the stove. You're going to get burned. Is that something you want to do now? No, it's not something I want to do. Okay. Now, but Loki Prime touches the stove because he wasn't told in advance. Like, he didn't know going in that Frigga was going to get killed as a result. He just did a thing.
Yeah.
And it resulted in that. But Loki Beta is now being told, hey, look, this is what was going to happen. Because of all your choices, this is what was going to happen. And he bought it. Like, he bought into it real fast and believed it and changed. He made his change instantly. So, yeah.
Well, I would not necessarily say he made his change instantly. He continued to struggle with his ways and his tendencies.
Well, I'm not saying that you won't struggle with it, but he made a decision.
Sure.
The decision was made.
His outlook changed.
Yeah. Now you might still struggle with some of your inherent beliefs and sort of just modes of conduct, but he was actively making the decision to make a change, and that all spawned like right away. Just simply having been told this is what you were going to lead to. And I also wonder this. Yes, it was seeing Frigga's death, but also in that same moment, he saw his own death. I mean, he saw how he was going to die. And I would say that probably had a huge impact on him as well. That all of my moments, all of my decisions, all of my life choices led to not just the death of my mother figure, but also my own death in a rather unceremonious, I mean, it was a pretty brutal strangulation at the hands of Thanos. So I would say that probably had a pretty big impact
For sure.
on him as well. So, and that had nothing to do with Thor, Dark World. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I definitely think Antonio's onto something. But I'm still not 100% willing to give Thor: The Dark World the level of importance that maybe others think it deserves in the grand scheme of the MCU.
Fair enough. Especially in comparison to Captain America and
the Winter Soldier.
That pathway. So we've got multiple pathways with of course the Avengers characters being central to those stories. And some are better than others. I'm rediscovering Captain America, and I'm impressed with Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Overall, what were your impressions seeing this again?
I enjoyed it a lot. I think I enjoyed it more maybe even than having seen it the first time. When I saw it the first time, I thought it was good. I thought it was different. It's darker, it's grittier, it's a whole lot less saturated. The MCU is making a turn, and we saw that starting with Iron Man 3, where suddenly the potential for PTSD is kicking in for Tony. The events, the aftermath of Phase 1 is making itself known. You have Tony going into a deeper, darker place. You have Thor even in a darker place. I mean, it's the Dark World. The loss of his mother, the loss of his brother. He leaves Asgard. And now you've got Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where Cap is confronted with the knowledge that his old friend, Bucky Barnes, his best friend, maybe even his only friend, who he thought died in World War II during a mission that Cap led. He now realizes that this guy is a Captain America of his own for the enemy side, and doesn't seem to remember him. And it brings back a flood of emotions for Cap, whereas it brings back really nothing for Bucky.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to complain that realistically in this moment or as a part of this story, you'd wonder, where is Iron Man? Where's Hulk? And I do complain about that as moments become bigger and bigger and these huge events, these huge crises are happening in Washington, D.C., where this takes place, where this film takes place. Where are the other Avengers? And I appreciate actually watching this again, that the ones who are central to this film are less super. So, of course, Steve Rogers and Natasha is Black Widow. She's not enhanced. She's a human being with incredible intelligence and tactful skills, and is an experienced spy.
We'll talk about whether she's enhanced in a moment, I think, because I wonder about that.
Okay. But generally, and then of course Bucky, who is the Winter Soldier, big spoiler, he's the Winter Soldier. He's definitely he's been pumped with some special sauce.
Yeah, he's enhanced and given a metal arm.
Yeah. So you've got some strength, and you've got superhuman forces happening, but it's a very grounded interaction. It's very grounded conflict in the sense that so much of this film is face-to-face combat and dialogue and exchange that's very, very intimate. You're not up in the sky and in the space. You're not dealing with the level of superhero power that distracts you from the psychology. So I very much appreciate that this happens on a level that pulls us into the real story, which is what you named, this huge betrayal. This entire film is about betrayal and the psychology of betrayal. And it happens at every level.
And I would say that it's also about, and I think this leads into that, it's all about what Nick Fury describes as compartmentalization. It's what? Compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the idea that you don't have to be out in the open necessarily for things to work or fail. I mean, but compartmentalization also means I don't have to tell you everything. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is you
right?
You don't have to be in the open, and no one is the entire movie. I mean, so with all of the complaining that Cap does in a scene with Nick Fury where he's livid that Nick doesn't share every element of the mission with him, and by the way, he's not entitled to all of that information anyway. Cap might be one of the least forthcoming people in the MCU. I mean, if we're talking about compartmentalization, that's Cap for me.
But what is it that you think Cap is holding back?
Everything emotionally, that guy is holding back. I think
he's, I mean, let's get there. This is a story. He's a fish out of water. He's been frozen for
70 years.
He emerges. He's thawed out. Then the Battle of New York happens. Mm-hmm. He's immediately thrusted into this huge intergalactic war. Yeah. He finds some purpose and I think belongingness with the Avengers. And then, as you mentioned, things really kind of seep in. Mm-hmm. He's living in DC. He's a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. being this alliance. It's an anti-terrorist intelligence agency with some form of alliance with the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. So there's, I think for Cap, this is fitting for him initially. This is where he belongs in terms of his positionality.
It's his purpose. Yeah. It's sort of what he feels like. It's what I was doing before I was put in ice.
This is his duty. Yeah. And yet we start to see the loneliness. Yeah. And the thwarted belongingness. He no longer he doesn't quite feel he fits in. Yeah. And it's really emphasized and pointed out by Natasha. There are moments throughout the film where she says, what about Sally in HR? What
Yeah.
about this girl? And sort of bringing up various women that maybe he might be interested in. And it's a running joke, but I think the undercurrent is you're a lonely person. And he does say that no one really gets him. No one understands him.
And he's constantly bringing up the fact that everyone he knows is dead.
Yeah.
Except for Peggy, who we see him visit in the hospital. So he has reestablished connection with her to some degree. Now she's on her deathbed.
She's like 90 something years old.
Right. So, but here's the problem. And I'm glad that you brought up Natasha, because the interesting thing, like Natasha is of great interest to me in this movie, especially because I feel like we are seeing more of Natasha here than we've really ever seen up to this point. Not just in terms of screen time, but in terms of the fact that we have never seen her ask other people about romantic relationships before. There has never been that sort of locker room talk. There has never been that encouragement to go get a family. I mean, her best friend is Hawkeye. But all they ever talk about are shared moments of action, shared moments in Budapest.
Like during their deployment.
Yeah, it's always, that's how she connects to Hawkeye. Her father figure maybe, might be like a Nick Fury. She clearly has a deep attachment to him because when he is shot in this movie and on the verge of death, she's the one who seems extremely affected by it. So really the two people she has the deepest connections with are Nick Fury, who is basically just a man of his job, and Hawkeye, who we believe to just be a man of his job at this point. We don't know about his family yet, technically. So there's that. So why is she so invested in getting Cap a girlfriend? Why, and she gets lighter pitched. She's more friendly now. She's less business. She's not the spy. She's, hey, how about this person in HR? How about this person in analytics? How about if you asked her out, she'd say, she is becoming his buddy, his chum. And I think it's brilliant because it seems out of character for Natasha. Natasha's a great spy. She doesn't have a family to speak of her own that we know of yet. Her entire life has been that of a spy and an assassin. So why does she care? Well, I've got a great moment here that I want you to take a listen to that I think answers everything. And it's a very emotional, everything is laid out in this conversation between Natasha and Cap. Let's take a listen.
Nobody special though?
Believe it or not, it's kind of hard to find someone with shared life experience.
Oh, it's all right. You just make something up.
What, like you?
I don't know. The truth is a matter of circumstance. It's not all things to all people, all the time. Neither am I.
It's a tough way to live.
It's a good way not to die, though.
It's kind of hard to trust someone when you don't know who that someone really is.
Yeah. Who do you want me to be?
How about a friend?
Well, there's a chance you might be in the wrong business, Rogers.
So in this moment, I am hearing her say, you need me to be, I am observing you and you need me to be the person that pushes you out into the world to adapt. This isn't how I would normally be with anyone else. And she's
not like that with anyone else.
Yeah,
right.
This is not how I would be with anyone else, but I am observing this in you, and you need this. You need to get out of the barracks. You need to get out of your apartment. You need to date that nurse that's living next door to you. You need me to be that person that brings joy to you. And so...
So you think that this is actually a part of her spy repertoire?
100%. 100%.
I like that. I do, because I think sometimes it can come across as trivial, or I remember when I first saw this movie, I wondered why the insistence on getting him a girlfriend, and I wondered if they were just trying to establish that the friendship was just that. Like there's absolutely little flirting, there's flirting between her and other characters, but with Cap, there's this different bond.
Yeah.
And I thought they were trying to establish that. And I like your theory much better, which is much more thoughtful and conscious. Like this is a very intentional play that she's making that's not harmful to him. Like she's not trying to betray him in these moments. I think she's trying to be. I just saw that episode of The Perfect Mate in Star Trek, The Next Generation, and it's sort of like that. Not quite. And this is kind of a stretch. Not quite the same,
right?
But she has the ability, much like that race in Star Trek, to respond to
your needs,
the person's needs, and in a way to almost kind of like fulfill that back and forth, that serve and return, which is so important socially. It's brilliant, and I hope that's it. I maybe we'll see more evidence of this in future movies, but that's really insightful.
What I love about this movie, and I never really noticed it before, is the fact that we're looking at two sides of the same coin. We're looking at two soldiers. That is essentially their entire purpose in life, is to be soldiers. Except one requires no emotion to do her job well, and the other requires all the emotion. He needs to believe in hope. He needs to believe that he's doing the right thing. She just needs the mission.
And he's not needy, but he's just so susceptible to betrayal. So throughout the movie, there are these highlights. There's a string of betrayals that take place. One of the first ones is Natasha doesn't tell him they're on a particular mission. She has a side mission. It's important to S.H.I.E.L.D. She doesn't tell Cap, and he's pissed. He doesn't understand why he can't know what she's doing. As you mentioned, Nick Fury finally lets Cap in on the secret that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been building this huge, like, military grade initiative. They have all these helicarriers and weapons. I mean, we can say weapons of mass destruction. Like literally, this is giant. And Cap is so emotionally injured, right? You can see in his responses, and it doesn't come across as entitlement. It comes across as disillusionment. It comes across as sadness, as, disappointment. I thought we were in this together. And we see, and this is why Marvel movies do this brilliantly, you can't have that from day one, in the same way that you can't have depression happen overnight. Cap's disillusionment has to happen over a period of time, and it's sinking in, and it's really taking hold on him. He's realizing that people are dismissing him. He's realizing people aren't including him. He's realizing there's so much more in the world of today, the post 9/11 today. There's so much more in that world that he's not a part of.
And I would also say just I think you're right, but I think just post World War II. I think World War II was the most obvious, black and white, you're with the Allies or you're with the Axis side, you're either.
That's why this movie is so good, because this movie dismantles that. And these movies
introduces the shades of gray into the world.
It's very nuanced and complicated. And had you not known, you're working for Hydra, basically. And at the end of the day, does it matter? And I think Nick Fury makes these comments that have us question our own alliances and comfort with this, right?
Yeah.
What is it, just better to have the gun loaded and pointed in service to protection? That's what S.H.I.E.L.D. is building.
Yeah.
Don't you want that? It's sort of like, I guess In today's world, that makes a lot of sense. Cap, however, refuses to participate in this level of service, that he really doesn't want to see the world that way, and he's resisting his participation until finally things fall apart, and he's the enemy.
Now, is he right in his? You think with a movie as titled Captain America, he's going to be the guy who's 100% right, and traditionally Cap is seen as the guy who's 100% right. My problem with Cap is that it is black and white thinking. It is just. It's sort of you're with me or you are against me. There is no shade of gray. And Nick Fury brings up an excellent point. Of course, Cap has an excellent response, but it's a philosophical argument that I can see both sides to. By having these 3 helicarriers that are entirely weaponized, with the ability to take out targets from a bazillion miles away, basically from orbit, and do so before even an attack is made. It's a preemptive strike. Cap says that's leading the world in fear, or through fear, which is what's going on in our world today. It's the belief that something could happen. Therefore, we need to stop it, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen. We need to put this up at the border. We need to have people here in this location, and we need to do this, because if they don't, by God, those people are going to come and take away our freedoms, and we're going to, whatever. The world is being led through fear today in a post 9/11 world, and Cap is not familiar with that, and that's not the way that he wants to think. But think about 9/11. If you knew that those people were boarding those airplanes for this purpose, and at the end of the day, by noon, the 2 towers, the Twin Towers, would have been struck by airplanes. The Pentagon would have an airplane inside of it. Another airplane would have been ditched in the field. Would you have preemptively taken out those targets? And so the question is, Cap's response is, I thought you waited until the crime was committed before serving punishment. Mm-hmm. Do you wait for that crime to be committed? Like, if you're Cap, do you wait for that crime to be committed before stopping it? Is he right or wrong?
Well, I think that he serves to raise... I think that Cap is applying his World War II philosophies and struggling to make them work in today's world. So in that case, I agree with you. Now, is he black or white? I think that this film asks us to deconstruct that a little bit more, because as you know, I mistook Cap as being just a purist, of a blind soldier.
Yeah.
And I think this movie helps me better understand that his point is, do not mistake my purity for weakness, and do not mistake my purity for blindness. Mm-hmm. This is where we get into the gray with him, and he's forced to reckon with his beliefs directly when he's got Bucky in front of him, the enemy, who is also his best friend.
Yeah.
And so he's literally challenged with that very philosophy that you're saying right now.
Yeah.
You know that this terrorist is going to murder your institution, your friends, and now you can disarm him. Like, you may be able to wipe out this threat. Do you do it? Mm-hmm. Toward the middle of the film, he's really reckoning with that decision. He's basically going to have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And at the nexus of everything we're talking about is that compromise. Mm-hmm. Are you going to compromise? Are you going to violate your own personal worldview in order to do what this country is asking you to do? Protect it.
And he doesn't.
And he does not. Right. He doesn't. And of course, things kind of work out, right? He and Bucky
become best friends again.
No, they're grappling basically at the end of this film in one of the helicarriers, and there's a moment where Cap essentially decides he kind of gives in to his own demise.
Yeah, he'd rather die than kill Bucky.
Yeah, and this isn't like a Loki level, like I'm going to perform a death, or I'm going to do this out of it. He steps away. He takes himself out of the equation. He's unwilling to participate in the system.
I love that you're bringing this up because I want to talk about it. But please continue.
And having just read Civil War in the comics, I'm seeing now things are very different in the films, but I'm seeing these moments of to watch Captain America descend in the water, potentially toward his own death, is not too dissimilar from the comics, where his friends say goodbye to him and he dies.
Yeah.
And they send him to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
There is that moment of he's willing to, and I know this is somewhat dark, but he's willing to give in to his disillusionment. He's willing to accept that he doesn't belong here. He's willing to accept that there's no way he can be a part of the world the way that he is.
Right.
So he acquiesces to death. He gives up. And that may sound cowardly to people, but I think that's his way of being true to himself. And that is where I believe you're right. This is very black and white.
You bring up his willingness to die for this, and there is I think this line is probably the turning point for Bucky. Let's take a listen to it here.
Then finish it. Because I'm with you to the end of the line.
That's the moment that Bucky starts to realize and starts to have the memory. Okay, I know this person. I have said this to this person. And that's when he saves Cap from dying. He does what he can to protect him up until the moment that he falls. And then after he falls, we see Winter Soldier / Bucky drag Cap up onto the bank of the river, and he leaves. He disappears. He's not going to stick around, but he's going to make sure that Cap survives. At least until he figures this stuff out for himself. He's now on his own. But this is the second time. This is the second time in 2 Captain America movies, at least, that Cap has basically suicided.
What was the other one?
He ditched the big plane into the...
Yeah, he drove the plane into the water.
Even though, and this is a point that you even brought up at the time, why doesn't he just bail out? He was like, oh, I'm taking this plane to the ground.
This is for the cause.
He was saying his goodbyes to Peggy. He was saying his goodbyes to everyone else. And he's like, I'm going to kill myself right now. He did it for the cause. It wasn't because he was depressed, but he did it for the cause. This time, he's not doing it for the cause. He's doing it for his own moral compass. I refuse to kill you, even though you have committed the crime at this point. I refuse to kill you because of who you were to me and who you still could be deep down inside. But again, like you said, he's willing to die. So I have to ask, this is a question that began weighing on me during the time that we were watching this movie, as we were watching just how lonely he is and just how unwilling he is to do fun things. When she's asking him, hey, you have big plans for the weekend? Or Then you've got, the young lady right next door, Sharon, who's asking about this. He refuses to engage in social interaction, and he's willing to sacrifice himself at the end. Are you seeing signs of him coping with depression, living with genuine, diagnosable depression?
For sure. I think that's a reasonable assumption at this time. When we were watching this film, I had some questions, right? We saw his apartment. I'm like, Shield could put him up in a really nice place.
Well, but he's not nice. Like he comes from Brooklyn.
Well, I think that came up because he chooses to live
humble
in a humble way in an apartment off site. If we see his apartment briefly, it's very dark. It's not. It sort of lacks life. It seems to be maybe where he goes, I don't know, to sleep or to have insomnia and not sleep. That was a glimpse into his non-Shield life. And it's not super exciting. It's actually kind of sad. And he's alone there. There's no family there. There are no pets there. He does connect to the neighbor, who we later learn is Agent 13. But at that time, the neighbor is a friendly young lady.
Nurse. Yeah.
And you get the sense, now I said fish out of water, you get the sense that he's lacking motivation, interest.
Yeah.
And just the energy, right? To assimilate to the social world. And that's indicative of a depressed mood. That low energy, apathy, hesitation, unwillingness to really kind of go for new experiences.
Right.
We know that he doesn't really sleep well. We didn't see it too much in this film, but
in Avengers, he specifically...
Yeah, he's up all night.
Nick Fury asks if he's having trouble sleeping. And I think his response is like, I slept for 70 years. I've slept enough. Like, he's clearly having trouble sleeping.
Yeah, the undercurrent is like, I've got a lot to think about, and I'm struggling.
Yeah.
You have, usually with depression, there is an interest in death.
Because he's constantly being reckless, and he's constantly living even more recklessly than the other heroes. Like think about it. Like, and I realize it's meant to be an action moment, but he dives out of the Quinjet in the beginning of the movie without a parachute. Like this is a guy that's like, well, yeah, he doesn't need one, but at the same time, come on, man. Like you're exhibiting, none of the other heroes do as much as he does recklessly. And when I say recklessly, I don't mean toward other people. I mean like specifically to his own body. And so there's a desire there. It's almost like he's reached that moment of, I just want to feel again. So if I feel the pain of hitting the water at terminal velocity, at least I'll feel again, because nothing that anyone here can do can hurt me. Even though we've established you can still be shot. I mean, he's shot at the end of this movie. It goes straight through him, and you see a moment of surprise.
And there could be reasons for that, right? An interest in experiencing pain may be an avenue toward softening or minimizing emotional pain. So when we experience physical pain, for some that can be distracting enough or fulfilling enough in a weird way that it takes away or releases some of it sort of diminishes or reconciles emotional pain. Another possibility is that he's experiencing passive suicidal ideation, which is an interest in one's own death, but not quite the energy and the capacity to act on to actually enact a suicidal attempt, but to act recklessly and to understand that by mistake he could die. That may be something that he's already reconciled. He's interested in. He's willing to be in kind of that danger zone.
It's so interesting. Like at the end of this movie, we watch him put Bucky in a sleeper hold and knock him out. Like he doesn't have to kill Bucky. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the thing, is we've already seen it established that he can overtake him, and knock him unconscious and then leave the helicarrier or do whatever. I mean, we could basically have a prisoner in Bucky. But instead he just says, you can kill me. Go ahead. You can do it. I'll let you.
Oh, so you're saying that even that moment could be his willingness to die, some kind of suicidal ideation.
Just go ahead and do it. Yeah, just do it. You know, and it almost...
Well, and let me say, and I'm interrupting you, but I completely support your idea, because we start to realize, and again, this builds over time, we start to realize that his loneliness, his disillusionment, his feelings of abandonment, his feelings of lack of belongingness, they may have accumulated to the point where he doesn't want to be a part of this anymore.
Doesn't want to be here anymore. Doesn't want to be a tool for the military anymore. And that's really his only purpose. I mean, think about it this way. This is just how lonely he is. He doesn't even have anyone who can keep up with him jogging. You know, like if you go...
I really love that is the beginning of this film.
Yeah.
You know, again, fish out of water, but also something so recreational and everyday is a unique experience for him. Who understands him?
No one.
No one. You know, like as it was presented to us.
Bucky might. Maybe that's what he's doing. He's desperately trying to save him. So that, you know, could you just go on a jog with me?
True. Bucky's been frozen similarly for 70 years, and
he understands all the same references.
That therefore don't kill the one person that may, and I think that's right. Don't kill the only person that may understand you.
Yeah, I mean, the only other person that would understand to some degree, and by that I mean simply having been alive at the same time, would be Peggy. But Peggy's had the life experience of having lived her 90 years.
Right. He doesn't relate to her.
She can't relate. He can't relate to her anymore. Yeah, like it is interesting.
I will say, and this is for me the core theme of the film. What makes this, or what drives this disillusionment and sorrow, and even suicidal ideation in Captain America, is the accumulation of betrayal trauma. That the friends, the boss, the institution, they have kept things from him. They have lied to him. And the biggest reveal is that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. for decades. And he has been completely blind to this internal poisoning of the thing that was symbolically real to him.
Not just blind, but he's been an active participant.
Sure. So blindly participating, not knowing that he's pushing the Hydra agenda forward. And I think that's what creates this final decision-making in him. This, like, there's a point of no return.
Yeah.
And I say betrayal trauma, which is a topic we haven't really talked about on the show. This is not necessarily a disorder. It's the experience that can happen when the institution or the person who you depend on for your survival and your meaning completely violates your trust.
Yeah.
And your well-being is very, very damaged by this. This is seen in married couples. This is seen in families. This is seen even in institutions. And what I like about this film is that they give us these moments to remind us that not everything is clear. Or rather, no relationship is clean of this. No relationship is exempt from betrayal. And Sam, who we haven't talked a lot about yet, but Sam, who of course is the Falcon, is introduced to us as somebody who served in the military and who's now working at the VA running these support groups.
Yeah.
And in the support group, we learn that many, many people are damaged by their experience as a service member or as a soldier. And I think that's another helpful part of this story. And, you know, reminds me that when I was working at the VA, the individuals, especially the service members who were the most harmed, were, it wasn't the events that were a part of the war. And I worked with people who were part of a lot of different wars, not just OIF, OEF. When I saw the most damage, it was when a person held beliefs that the institution failed them.
Yeah.
That it was their commanding officer or the military itself, or even, you know, the USA has put me in danger and put me in a situation, did not inform me of all the things I needed to know, or didn't protect me in the ways I needed to be protected. And that's where we see such deleterious aftermath psychologically for a lot of these individuals. So I appreciated hearing Sam talk with trauma survivors and folks who are trying to work and recover. You know, they're working on their mental health, they're recovering from their traumas, and he's highlighting that there's going to be some things that you leave there. And I think a part of that message means the mentality of betrayal has to be reconciled or resolved. You've got to let go of that, because that's what's going to kill you.
Yeah. By the way, I just looked up the definition from the CDC of depression. Someone who experiences 5 or more of the following symptoms for a continuous period of at least 2 weeks. I would say that this applies. It's been longer than 2 weeks since he's woken up from the ice. Depressed or sad mood. I would say he has that. He qualifies there. Diminished interest in activities which used to be pleasurable. I would say that he qualifies there. Weight gain or loss. Well, he gained a crap ton of weight when he was given the serum, but
but let's take pause on that, because that may not apply to him.
No. But, well, you know, and the serum won't allow him to lose the weight or gain the weight at this. Like, his metabolism is just
But what I would like to point out is that before he became a super soldier, he wasn't exactly the healthiest person.
No, he was
psychologically.
Feeble. Yeah.
No, I'm talking physically. I'm talking psychologically. He had been bullied. He had, we saw in this film, he had parental loss. He was lonely. And Bucky, that flashback is super important, because Steve Rogers, before he became Captain America, was very lonely. And Bucky offered up literally housing, like, come live with me. Like, you don't have to be by yourself. You don't have to be without loved ones. And that, I think, is a hardship that can lend itself to depression, that amount of loneliness. And he already, you know, frankly, he already felt like an other. He didn't fit in. And yes, that can lead to feelings of sadness and chronic depression.
Yeah. So then, so after weight gain or loss, we've got psychomotor, agitation, or retardation. I'm not 100%.
Well, so that means that there's almost like on the one hand, the agitation means almost like restlessness, like
jittery.
You can't quite sit still, you can't rest yourself.
I have that. I'm just bouncing leg. Like, yes. I just feel like I've constantly got energy that needs to be expended.
And it's emotional as well as physical. So it's that kind of restlessness of the mind as well. But psychomotor is that kind of relationship between your body and your brain. And
retardation, I guess, would be like more of a lethargic.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Okay.
And that's what we see in a lot of depressed patients, where they're even slow to move, you know, slow to get things done. There's this slowness and a delayed response. You can even hear it in people's speech. Sometimes they speak slowly, or they just really don't. They're not very fluent. They're not speaking a lot. That can be a sign of depression. We don't see that.
Yeah, we don't
way.
see it. Yeah, I think the serum would probably prevent the retardation of psychomotor movement, but we've never seen him be jittery or bouncy. He seems to be pretty in control of his body. Of course, that could also be a result of the serum. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Fatigue, definitely. We talked about his inability to sleep. He has problems with his body. I think the serum is probably counteracting effects of fatigue, but I think mentally he is probably dealing with a significant amount of fatigue. Inappropriate guilt. I mean, he does feel responsible for Bucky's death. Like he feels responsible for Bucky having been taken by Zola and experimented on. And I wouldn't call it appropriate guilt. I mean, he does say that it was because of a mission he led. But he does feel guilty for that.
Mm-hmm.
Difficulties concentrating. I've never seen him have any difficulties with concentrating.
I'm not noticing that.
No. Recurrent thoughts of death. Oh, that's the end. Yeah, recurrent
all
thoughts of death. Yeah, so
time.
he's got it all the time. So let's see. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4.
He needs 5.
5. We've got 5.
Yeah.
So he fits. He is not the Superman character. He is not the perfect being that everyone assumes Captain America to be. Even you said when there's the scene, and I don't know why. Maybe a listener can explain this to me, because I'm losing. My family and I lived just outside of DC for several years. Used to go to the Smithsonian's on a regular basis. My favorite of all time is the Air and Space Museum. Second favorite is American History, Museum of U.S. History, then Natural History. Why is Cap's display in the Air and Space Museum? Is it because he went down in a big airplane at the end of his life?
He piloted one plane, and
Poorly.
And it was very, very important to the cause.
Yeah, like the Valkyrie isn't in the Air and Space Museum, so I don't know why Cap is there. Like, I would think maybe U.S. history, he would go into that museum.
Maybe that's the only museum that allows filming.
I have no idea. It's like, yeah, we see some cool planes in the establishing shot of that. We see the Spirit of St. Louis with Charles Lindbergh's plane. It was weird. I don't know why he's in the Air and Space Museum, but even you were like, what kind of guy goes into his own and
exhibit?
I think it was
hobby, now I did question it. His hobby is to disguise himself and walk alone.
His hobby. Well, I wouldn't call it a hobby. He's looking back on those he loved.
It's what he does on his free time.
Yeah, he's going back to the people.
He visits the exhibit that honors him and his friends from World War II.
He doesn't really spend very much time at his part. He spends more time with Bucky and the Peggy video and the Howling Commandos. Like he spends all of his time in that area, not like, hey, look at me.
Looking at himself.
Look at me.
But
I will say this, in the same way that you asked that question. So there's a moment where they go back to the camp where we saw that he got the serum and the basic training. What kind of a lunatic imagines himself running and stopping and looking back at you? He's
not okay.
Little Steve stops and looks back at Big Steve.
He's not well.
And
he's
you're like,
not well.
Like I would be like, look, I ran down that and I was a mile behind the rest of my unit. But but I would never think to like have myself stop and look at me. Like,
is that a hallucination? Because
well, it's not a memory.
No, it's right. How can it be a memory?
like
He's
the
looking
kid,
at himself.
Yeah, he's just
Some people with chronic severe depression will experience hallucinations, and that,
I don't think this was meant to be a hallucination so much. Like I think
stretching
it well, no, I don't think you're stretching it. I think it was meant to show us, the audience, that he remembers this road. He remembers. But the creepy part at the end is that he stops and looks back at himself. And I realized that is meant to be cinematic. And, but if you take it within the context of the film itself, he just imagined himself stopping and staring back at himself, the big hulking Captain America versus the tiny puny Steve Rogers. It was a real creepy moment for me.
It's creepy, but I think that it's profoundly sad too.
Oh, it is profoundly sad.
That when he remembers the place that trained him, that this is a pivotal experience. Now, this was also the place where he got the serum.
Yep.
Ultimately.
Yep.
He immediately goes back to moments where he's rejected, alone, perhaps perhaps at that point he was in a dark place.
Yeah.
Maybe that's him looking back and realizing, hey, even at that point, I was not okay.
Yeah.
And I was incredibly lonely and didn't fit in. Mm-hmm. And here I am, even with the serum, even as a member of the Avengers, even as an important figure in S.H.I.E.L.D., and I'm that same kid. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And holy cow, I'm hallucinating. I'm not well. But that's a really, these scenes are like, he's so fixated and kind of stuck in his past. Mm-hmm. And I understand that, because it's like, if I can't belong in the present, I'm finding comfort and understanding in the past. Yeah. And that's also indicative of depression. Yeah. It's very, very concerning that this is kind of where his mind is. Yeah. And of course, throughout the film, he's also experiencing a lot of life-threatening, events. Like right after that moment, he and Black Widow experience a bomb go off, targeting them. Yeah, yeah. And they survive it, and yet that's another sort of a traumatic, threatening event that leaves him incredibly vulnerable.
Now, this might be stretching it, but we talked about his willingness to give up. In that moment, when the rocket is hurtling toward them, he chooses to survive. Now, he's protecting Black Widow. He doesn't want her to die as a result of him dying. It could be different if it were just him by himself.
Oh, so you're going there. So if it were just him, I think he likely would have died there.
I don't know that he would have, because Bucky wasn't in the mix. Like, I think he still had the mission of finding Bucky. He still had the mission of
he had met Bucky by then. Yes.
He had at very least engaged the Winter Soldier. Like, he threw the shield, Bucky caught it, the Winter Soldier caught it, threw it back. It at the very least. But I think by that point in the movie, we'd already established that it's Bucky. So he still has that mystery to solve. But so I guess that's the answer to that. That's the answer to that question is he's not ready to go in that moment. But I did find myself wondering, I do find myself wondering now, when you bring up that he's looking at himself and remembering from where he came and where he is now, if maybe even that one little hallucination or whatever reinstilled him for a moment with that pride of the privilege of being who I am.
No, but thus, I didn't get that from that scene.
No, me neither. But I'm saying, is that potentially why he saved himself? Like suddenly I'm, but no, I think
he did what he was meant to do, which is to protect Black Widow.
Yeah. Yeah, because really that's what it is too, is he puts her under the shield. I mean, he puts them both under the shield.
Yeah,
but
it also allows them to have a conversation about trust.
Yeah.
Because at this point, again, he's completely isolated in his feelings and not sure who he can trust.
Yeah.
And they have that conversation where he learns that, despite some of her tendencies and some of her secrecy, she will save his life. And it comes down to, would you save my life?
Yeah.
And they both agree they would. And I think that's an important part of this.
Yep. I don't want to spend any time really focusing on Bucky yet.
Okay.
Because we don't actually get to see much about what he's going through. We know that we're going to see more of that momentarily. We'll see that in a future movie.
We've got to talk about brainwashing in the future.
I'm not saying that we have to talk about that because we have not technically seen that yet. But yes,
we
I
know
think
at this point that he's had a severe memory loss.
Yeah.
So
I do want to ask about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they use like the electric shock, but it's like the convulsive therapy, right?
So they use now, of course, it's an exaggerated form of this. It's fictionalized, but it comes down to sending electrical currents through his brain.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, that is what ECT is. And people who undergo ECT do report memory loss, usually around the time, memory loss of what happens around the time of the treatments.
So what is the deal with that? Because I know that it's convulsive. Like I know that they will use it to basically what they're doing is with these electric currents, they're basically inducing a seizure, right? That's essentially what it is. They're inducing a seizure which relieves something in people who are depressed or have certain things in their brain. Like, explain what
it's really meant to hijack the neurochemical activity in the brain.
Okay.
And it's holistic. It's global. It's not like now there are interventions that focus on a particular part of the brain.
Yeah.
Which are in fact more sophisticated and in some cases more effective. Mm-hmm. But ECT, which has been around for decades now.
I know the famed talk show host Dick Cavett, in his book, in his autobiography, he talks about his severe depression, and he had electric shock therapy twice, and the second time it worked. He said the second time he felt something click, mm-hmm. and from that moment on, he's never needed that sort of treatment again. Like
usually, it takes several sessions.
Yeah.
Over a period of time, for several years.
Yeah. For
there to be observable effects.
Yeah.
Improvements, and it's in what we see in this film. I mean, it's torture. This is definitely not ECT. This is sending intense currents through his brain and through his body.
For the purpose of wiping his memory.
They're wiping his memory, and that's not realistic, but I can see why that's the method. It has some element of, it has some fundamental, origins there, and
it's grounded in science and reality in some ways, so that we can believe that it's true. Okay. All I want to say is that I think it's amazing that they got someone with the caliber of Robert Redford to play their villain. And I also think he did a wonderful job.
And then we'll talk about Black Widow in the future because there's a film about her. Mm-hmm. I liked that it's too bad that this is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. This is Captain America, Black Widow, and the Winter Soldier. This is Cap's story, but she's so fundamental to this movie. Mm-hmm. She's in quite a bit of this.
And we can also say that Nick Fury has a pretty big role in this as well, and we even get a little bit of insight into him. He tells a little story about his grandfather and basically how he instilled in him the belief to just trust no one. You can still be a nice guy, you can still say hi to everyone on the street, but you're probably carrying a loaded 22 in a bag of rolled up dollar bills or crumbled up dollar bills. Like it is an interesting sort of insight into Nick as well, especially when he is at his most vulnerable.
Yeah, there's a bit of Batman in him, you know, kind of that like have all the contingencies, don't trust anybody, hold back, don't form relationships.
I like where you're going with this. That's interesting. Yeah. And only he can be the one to manage it all. It's like he's not necessarily the one going out and doing the missions, but he is certainly the one sending the people out and only telling them what they need to know to make those. I like this. Let us know if you like the comparison, Nick Fury to Batman. Drea, ultimately, what did you think about Captain America, the Winter Soldier?
I really loved Captain America, Black Widow, and the Winter Soldier. It was really good. I recommend a rewatch if folks haven't seen it since it came out in the theaters. I'm actually more excited about what's next.
What is next?
The first, am I wrong? Is it the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Guardians of the Galaxy is next.
The first one.
You're in it for the tunes, right?
Oh, no. I'm in it for the psychology.
Okay.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. This might be the first time I've seen it. Maybe I think
What?
sorry. This might be the first time I've seen it since it was in theaters. I don't think we've ever like sat down and just watched Guardians of the Galaxy together. Maybe we have.
I don't watch it with you, but I
know
definitely
you've seen
watch it on my own.
But I don't think. Most of these movies aren't like necessarily like, hey, it's a Saturday, let me pop in Winter Soldier. This was the first appearance of the Russo brothers, though. They really proved themselves to be people who wanted to tell deep, deep stories. And I also think they are the first directors to truly get the shield and how the shield and how Cap should be using the shield. Like his sequences with the shield in this movie are so much better than previous.
The stunts in this film are amazing.
Yeah.
You have long scenes that are just back-to-back action and not explosion after explosion like in the Avengers film. This is like hand-to-hand combat and just a lot of interaction. It's quite good. Yeah. And again, very grounded. It's not superhero level. It's very face-to-face, usually human to human.
I can't wait to get to the end of our analysis of these films to talk about Peggy in this one, because I encourage listeners to remember Peggy from this film, because she basically says, my regret is that you didn't get to live a full life, Cap. And based on things we know in the future, seems like she's being dishonest. So I want to save all that. I don't want to discuss it because we haven't seen it happen, but she has information that he doesn't. Let's keep that in the back of our minds.
Okay.
Until next time, Drea, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
They can find me online on my website, drdreapsychology.com, or on socials. And my social handle is @ArkhamAsylumDoc.
You can find me on Twitter. I am @bward028, or on Instagram @b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter @Arkham Sessions, or on Instagram @The Arkham Sessions. Come find us on Facebook and join Patreon for some benefits that other listeners aren't going to get. For instance, this coming Sunday, Halloween, October 31st, we are going to be releasing an episode that covers our analysis of the 2-part Long Halloween movie that DC and Warner Brothers just recently released. I'm looking forward to everyone hearing that, and that will be a Patreon exclusive, at least for the foreseeable future. So come join us on Patreon for that. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
I couldn't leave my best girl. Not when she owes me a dance.